Every choice builds character. On the Virtuosity podcast, we explore how to make every day a rep toward excellence. I'm Corey, your host and co-founder of Virtuosity. My journey into character development began in sport, where I discovered that strengthening my character didn't just improve my performance, it transformed my entire life. Since then, I've been gripped with understanding how we can intentionally build character to fuel both personal and professional success. At Virtuosity, we believe character is like a muscle. It needs consistent training. That's why we've built a research-based system that acts as your character gym, making character development practical, scalable, and accessible, even within the largest organizations. On this podcast, we sit down with participants from our flagship Virtuosity Program, where individuals commit to a full year of daily character development powered by Virtuosity. Our guests will share why character matters to them, how they're applying it in their personal and professional lives, and the insights they've gained along the way. We hope these conversations challenge, inspire, and equip you with new ways to integrate character into your own journey. Subscribe to stay up to date with our weekly episodes, and if something resonates, share it with your friends and colleagues. Ready to start your own Virtuosity journey? Download the Virtuosity Character app or visit virtuositycharacter.ca to learn more. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 13th episode of the Virtuosity podcast. If you're new, I encourage you to check out our launch episode with Mary Crossan for a powerful introduction to the series. Today, we're thrilled to share a special episode featuring insights on partnership in character development. Joining us are Kiel Garramone and Mark Chow. Kiel, as both CEO and research practice lead of KRW International, brings over 30 years of executive experience, providing coaching and advisory services to boards and the C-suite. One of the principal field researchers for the seminal Return on Character project, she is now focused on sharing return on character broadly in the world. And Mark was born and raised in Canada, but has spent almost all of his working life in Asia. His career has spanned management consulting in Toronto, Shanghai, and Stockholm, internet technology in Beijing and Hong Kong, and agriculture and commodities in Singapore. His roles have generally involved strategy and business development, and he has been a pioneer in building local teams and launching many young Asians into rewarding careers over the past 3 decades. Today, he lives in Singapore, where he is working towards blending strategy consulting, executive coaching, and non-executive board positions for the next stage of his career. Well, welcome, Kiel and Mark, to the Virtuosity podcast. I'm so excited for you to be joining today because you two have been probably some of the most committed people I've seen throughout this program, and you're partners. So we've got a really unique episode from being able to learn from the insights that you have to share today. And I do want to just briefly kind of speak to both of you before we launch into the first question. And so, Kiel, you've been in the character space for quite a while, and we've been really lucky to be able to kind of join forces over the last few years to be able to learn from one another. And, you know, you're really doing some great work, continuing the initial work of your father with his, probably one of his most notable pieces on the Return on Character book, and looking at the phenomenal benefits that come with leaders of strong character. And so it's been great to learn from what you're doing and from you being able to, you know, see what we're doing. And then Mark, you are newer to the character space, and I feel like you're quite deep into it now that you've been into it for about 10 months, and no better person for you to partner with than Kiel, who's been in the character space for a while. So it's just, it's great to have you in the character space, and you've been in management and consulting and coaching. So the keen eye that you bring to the character space has been really insightful for us too. So before we jump into the really unique piece that we have with both of you here today on the partnership, I want to start by asking you both what I typically ask all of our guests which is, why does character matter to you? So Kiel, I'll start with you, and then you can pass it over to Mark.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for all of your kind words, Corey. It's been just an absolute, privilege to be working with you and Mary. And I know my father would, it makes me a little emotional. My father would so want to be here and doing this with all of us too. So thank you again for that. So the obvious answer for me about why does character matter to me, it's become my life's work. What we understand about the benefits and implications of character-driven leadership are all about how, first of all, you even recognize what problems there are, how you see the problems, and then how you address them. And that's what leadership's about, is solving problems, leading people to better places. And we just have abundant evidence that when you do that through the power and alignment with your character, it's better for everyone. So, Mark, what have your thoughts become over the 10 months that you've worked on this?
Well, I started the journey when Mary and I talked about what has been happening and her introduction to virtuosity. I think it was really a series of questions. The first question was, character is such a big, important philosophical word. So my first question was, what is the definition? Or more precisely, what is my definition? And that was very much a starting point. The second question was around, why does it matter in my life? And that was a reflective one. And I think across the things I've done, the places I've lived, and then especially what you just mentioned around leadership, how does that fit in? And then the third one was, okay, what action am I going to take about this? And so character to me is the combination, or this quest is sort of a journey of the combination of seeking answers to that. From what were the elements of character that I learned from my parents, to what are the elements of character that I want to bring to my children, to where have I seen good, bad, or ugly character choices in my journey in life, and how have they differed across geographies, across companies, and across my stages of life. And then finally, how to actually bring those learnings into every day, whether it's just the way I live and conduct myself, or into that coaching practice that Corey mentioned. And I think that, I owe a lot to you, Kelly, because the partnership has really accelerated my reflections on those questions. And to some degree, you've helped me through questions of your own find some answers. So it's been a great journey.
That's such a nice lead into this partnership piece. And so, you know, when I ask people why they think character matters to them, a lot of us can answer to that, but it's a whole other kind of ball game to think about. Now, how do we actually prioritize this? How do we cultivate it? How do we develop it? And so that's what we've been trying to do in the Virtuosity program for the last 10 months now. And one of the really kind of cornerstones that we try to encourage people to do is take this partnership approach. And so the 7 strategies is a framework that we use to kind of support the design of our program. And one of those strategies is the friendship strategy. So it's this idea that I kind of think about it in terms of kind of 4 ways that helps our development. It really helps accountability. So just as you're trying to build a new habit, it's a lot more powerful when you do it with somebody else. Secondly, it shines a light on things that we may not see in ourselves. So it acts as that really powerful mirror. Third, it helps us kind of further our insights. When we exchange ideas and concepts with one another, it kind of stretches our thinking and helps us see the gaps in our own thinking. And then lastly, 4, which I think is really powerful, is it expands our awareness of what character is by bringing it just not within ourselves, but how does this actually evolve and develop in other people? And in understanding that, it helps our own development. And so you both have taken this to, 100% commitment in the Virtuosity program. You have been partners, and I'm really excited for you to be able to share your story, because it's a very unique story. It's been a very beautiful story. And so I'm just going to start with the first question, which is, how did you even become partners in the first place? Did you know each other beforehand? Where do you live? All of the details there. So Kelly or Mark, whoever wants to start on that one.
I can kick it off. I think the answer is we were both late starters to the program and missed the session in January. And so the introduction was actually courtesy of you, Corey, and we don't know how you did it. We don't know what magic formula you used to pair us together.
Brilliant.
So we did not know each other beforehand. I am based in Singapore, and I didn't find anyone else from Singapore in the program. And so there was no easy, natural, in-person partner to pick, so to speak. So it was a delight to get to know Kelly, and I think that we have some similarities or some areas in common. We both grew up in the Midwest. We're both quite nerdy and curious, and we are I think, to your first point in the partnership pillars, we're both highly accountable, and so I think that that came out and really helped us drive the partnership. Over to you, Kelly.
Yeah, all of that is true. I'm gonna say I think you're nerdier than I am, but we'll let it go.
Fair enough.
You make spreadsheets out of our posts, okay? That's all I'm gonna say. Um, but like he says, Corey, it was a stroke of brilliance. I don't know if it was just random or we were the last two people, so we got put together. Um, but what I particularly appreciated was we had enough in common, like with him having grown up in the Midwest and in Canada and et cetera. And also we're both kind of globalists because I have a foreign service family and lived everywhere. But even more so, him having had like a McKinsey and, Cargill background, he's the kind of leader that I'm usually working with too, that can be highly skeptical about that connection between sort of soft things and data and impact. And so it was really good for both of us because his skepticism found a place that he could debate well, and I always want to hear more from those skeptics about what matters to them and what doesn't. So we just had a lot in common, both personally and professionally, that really worked.
Yeah, it was, I would say, less genius. It wasn't just you two being the last people in the program, but I knew that you're both highly committed individuals, and that accountability that Mark spoke to, I think definitely resonated. And so, yeah, I mean, I thought the partnership would work out well, but it's turned out way beyond even my wildest expectations. And I think this starting point is really powerful because a lot of people do ask us who should be partners in this type of program, and a lot of people kind of shy away from, oh, if I don't see this person every day, can I really be a partner with them in the character development journey? And we essentially encourage you guys that it can be a way to almost build a relationship and learn something about one another. And so I think this partnership, and even what we actually find from our research, is people that engage in these partnership activities, it's one of the biggest predictors of commitment to character development and changes in character. So for anyone listening, if they are wondering, oh, who should I be a partner with, or how could we bring partnership into our character development programs, there are so many different ways you can think about partnering people. And at the very basic level, it is this opportunity to actually learn and build relationships, even if you don't know one another yet. But going off of that point, what were some of the reservations that you may have had going into it, not knowing one another, having extremely different time zones? What was on your mind? And tell us a little bit about that.
I didn't have any reservations, so I should let Kelly speak first, and then we'll see if I can think a bit more on that one. Kelly.
I didn't really have any reservations either. I am someone who does better in team and partnership anyway, so I was actually grateful for that. I do know that, I've got colleagues who, when I tell them about this, they'd be like, oh my God, I would never do that, in terms of, bearing my soul to a perfect stranger. And I was like, but on the other hand, he's on the other side of the planet. Like, what consequence can there be? Right. So, yeah, I didn't have any, and I can understand why people might, but we were just lucky that neither of us came to it with reservations, so we didn't have to kind of fight through that at all.
And I think with those reservations, I think even if you had anything, it was probably mitigated very quickly because from my understanding, you set up these really intentional structures to get the most out of it. So could you walk us through some of the structures that you set up to help you get the most out of this partnership together, especially being on opposite sides of the world?
I think the first thing was to agree sort of the cadence and the timing. And we decided to talk weekly or speak weekly at the beginning. And then we had a conversation, if I recall correctly, that we would shift it maybe to bi-weekly. We have met 18 times over 6 months. So we've managed to keep the cadence most of the time. So I think that was number one. I think a second one very much was in our second meeting, and it was more Kelly's idea to share our stories and really spend an entire, whatever, hour and a half telling us about each other and getting, the full story, the full picture. And I think that went a long way. I thought that was a really important part of it. Now I'll close with the nerdiness point. Um, I think we did very diligently work through the Virtuosity homework. And in those updates, I at least made a very early effort to combine both the scores on your, sort of the performance and the interaction scores, together with the comments or the diary of the day. And I think, at least for me, that gave me a structure to calibrate how Kelly was feeling and how Kelly was scoring herself on whichever character element it happened to be that week. And so that gave me at least a very nerdy structure to be able to understand where she was coming from and then relate it to how I was feeling on the subject at the same time. So those were some of the structures that we tried. Kelly.
Yeah, I'll add that that Mark's capacity to track data was really interesting, because then he would come back to me and say, "Well, you've got like a 2.7% increase on your score." I mean, not quite like that. I'm teasing you, oh, he could have. They were in a spreadsheet on your scores, and I'd be like, "Really? Huh? I wasn't aware of that." And so it was a great way to have a new kind of perspective and reflection about what I was working on. And likewise, Mark's more spare in what he would write rather than in his scoring. So, but he would give me enough kernels that I'd be like, "Well, tell me more about this," and you kind of dig in. So, what I do like about the app, Corey, is that you have different modalities in there. So, depending on what kind of data people pay attention to or that matters to them, there's a way in for each, and that worked for us. Then that we kind of leveraged what was our strength for each of us. Um, the life story exercise, I would highly recommend everybody. One of the things when you asked us this, of course, Mark in his very methodical way said, "All right, how much of this is magic and how much is replicable? Let's figure this out." So we do have a spreadsheet on that too, of each of your questions of what's unique to us and what could be replicable. And that life story exercise is a replicable thing. Is we took a whole session for each of us, just so one person was the focus for each one. And the purpose of it is to have a frame of how did somebody come by their character habits as they are now? What were those seminal experiences? How did they learn how the world works and their place in it? How did that affect their leadership? Because that gives you such essential context then for whatever comes through the program itself. And that's how I think, in just through a screen and in on other sides of the world, we could become, we're friends now. I was asking him the other day if he was going to be at the character conference in Ivy in November, because if he was, I would have jumped on a plane to go see him. Unfortunately, I can't go now anyway. But anyway, that exercise is definitely replicable, and I'd just highly recommend it. And if anybody wants like a frame for that, let me know. I can offer a frame for it as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up. What is replicable? For some reason, that's a hard word to say, versus what is unique to you. And so I love that you've really kind of parsed that out, so that as people are listening to this, they can figure out what should we bake into our partnership versus what could be kind of unique. And I think too, this the weekly meet, or somewhat, did you say weekly or monthly meeting?
We were meeting weekly, bi-weekly through the period. I think the longest gap might have been 3 weeks for travel reasons, but we were pretty regular.
Yeah, I think that is such a powerful piece, and it's this idea that the app is kind of the backbone of our development, but it's how you bring it out of the app. How do you bring these insights and reflections into conversation. And it's amazing how much you've been able to do on other sides of the world, let alone imagine people are doing this within their teams or organizations, even if you're not in the same office space, even if you don't see one another. Imagine having that weekly touch point and thinking about how much more you can support and understand your teammates, your colleagues, your coworkers. Mary and I, my mom, we're partners in Virtuosity, and we try and meet weekly as well. At the end of the week, when you get that weekly insights report, you're able to see how your partner assesses you versus how you do it. And we always look at what are some of the gaps. And that one's particularly interesting for us because we do talk to each other every single day. And so that becomes a really good mirror to see how other people might be seeing us versus how we might see ourselves. So I find that just the standing meeting once a week is a really kind of basic thing, I think all people could kind of take away from this.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked before about sharing your daily reflections with one another. So in the app, there's the choice that you can share your reflections. And I just wanted to maybe take a step back that I think the really nice way that we've set up the partner feature in the app is that none of your personal reflections will be shared with your partner unless you choose to share them. The only things that are shared with your partner is when you've been explicitly asked to assess your partner. But you've taken the next step and said, no, I want to share my personal reflections with my partner, which I think is so valuable. Can you share more about why you made that decision in the first place and other kind of insights or experiences you've had along with doing that?
I again, very much like the first question about the choice of partner, I didn't have any reservations about doing it. And I felt that if I'm going to, get Kelly's input or get Kelly's feedback, it's best that she sees as much of it as possible. I think over the time that we've done it together, there's less than a half dozen times where I chose not to share. And that's not because it was too personal or private. It was just because I had nothing to say. It was not very useful. So there was, I think, just a belief that it would be helpful. And that belief strengthened within the first few sessions, because as Kelly said, we would often start with questions. Right? When you wrote this, what did you mean? Or can you tell me more about that incident? Or in my case, it seems that this pattern leads to low scores, and this set of circumstances may lead to high scores. Is there anything in that for you? So I think it strengthened the connection because you do see it and you're thinking about your partner even before that weekly connect. And by having that, let's call it data, it leads to both wider conversations and deeper conversations, I think, than you would have otherwise. So very valuable share feature. And I would encourage people not to hold back on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Corey, as you know, I even asked you to extend the text limit for the journaling, right? And that's because, for me and for my style, it was the reflections about the scores that I wanted to remember and matter. And it was also a way to share with him because we don't work together, there's no other way to see it. And it gave us a platform for then how would we spend our time when we did meet? Because we're taking a lot of time out of our lives to meet with each other. So let's make it be worthwhile and substantive. So it essentially helped to create then an agenda or a focus for when we would meet, the more that we would share. And it was just also another way to continue getting to know each other and to learn about each other. I found that, how if you're driving in your car and your kids are in the back seat, you have some of the most substantial conversations with them. Parents talk about that all the time. And I think it's because you don't have that really hard, direct eye contact. So it gives people a little bit of distance and comfort to really share. I felt it was a similar kind of a thing with Mark, is that I knew there was this human that I'm really accountable to and I would talk to who's really going to see it. But there's arm's lengthness of being able to reflect and really share without having to hear his reaction in the moment about what I was saying, actually in a paradoxical kind of way, I think enabled me to be even more vulnerable or transparent than if we'd done everything eyeball to eyeball on Zoom.
Yeah, there's something quite interesting about, by the way, I was getting shivers as you were talking about these great conversations with your kids in the back, having that like little space, because I can definitely say I've been there. And there is something really special about being able to just write your thoughts and share them and not feel like there needs to be a response or an action item like we have with our emails every single day. So that really resonates. And just to push this a little bit further, we get questions a lot for people that are in partnerships. They've asked us to create a resource, which we certainly could, which is like, what do we talk about during, like, how should we use our hour if we're meeting weekly? What prompts do you have? And it seems like because you've really been kind of digesting each other's reflections during the week, you almost come up with your own curiosities and your own questions. Has that been the case, or have you had more structure in terms of the types of questions or check-ins you do use in your time together?
Interesting question. I don't believe we've ever followed a structure week by week. I think a few times when we felt that we weren't finished with a conversation, we would extend it into the next week.
Hmm.
I think to the degree that there's structure, it would usually come after the monthly virtuosity meetings. And we would follow up on what was discussed, how we felt about it, which exercises we liked or didn't like. And that usually led to a more deliberate conversation. Um, and so, other than that, I'm not sure if we ever set up something very systematic. I believe it was more or less free flowing, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And so I think for those who are in partnerships and wanting a formula, we may not be the best people to talk to on that.
Yeah, other than to let it emerge from your reflections and your experience in the monthly workshops. Um, sorry, just lost my train of thought. There was something else I was going to add to that. So I lost it. Oh,
Well, we can circle back.
yeah.
We can circle back. I'll come back to you in a second, because I think just letting it emerge is quite interesting. And if people aren't sharing their own reflections with their partner, even just like the recommendation you gave earlier about starting with your life story, it's the storytelling approach. So actually just starting with, what have you learned in the last week, and what do you think about what I've learned? Whereas if you are sharing your insights with each other, then you're going to have more questions about the other person. But I think just that storytelling experiential piece is a really good place to start. And then if you are looking at that weekly reporting, if there are those gaps in terms of how your partner's seeing you versus how you see yourself, that can be also a really good place to start. Kelly, it looks like you may have caught your thought back. So,
Yes, I did. Thank you. I just got so absorbed in listening that it left for a moment. But the what we thought we'd try, actually, so we were kind of acutely aware it's coming to an end here soon, is to choose the same sub behavior in a month, so that, because we've chosen different things because we have different needs and perspectives, because we thought that might be an interesting thing, is like in the next level of how we explore something and hold each other accountable. We also didn't do, but we thought this would be something we could do, is that in the monthly lesson, there are those reflections there. Those we haven't done so formally, so that would be another option. So I'm just trying to think of things that we had thought of that could be replicable for others as a way to give some structure.
yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, the weekly lessons have those reflection questions in there, so you could be sharing that with your partner. That's a really good idea. Um, in terms of this process, so we are trying to focus on the development of character, but in being partners and even in trying to develop our character, we actually need to activate character in doing so. And so now that you're at the end of the program almost, and you went through most of the dimensions, if you look back and think about what were the dimensions that you really had to kind of call on or activate to help you do this partnership well?
Yeah, we talked at the get-go about accountability, so I think that one we don't need to speak too much more about. I think collaboration in how we worked together and how we shared was one. But the two that perhaps I didn't really expect so much from, but which became very central, were integrity and humility. Integrity with respect to the authenticity and the transparency, much to your previous question, what we shared and why, and the humility of learning and having curiosity. And then eventually to, just to be grateful that there was somebody on the other side of the planet reading what I wrote and then having a conversation about it. So I think that the accountability and the collaboration are sort of the basics, but then going beyond that, the integrity and humility points became much more central and much more important to make it work, in my view.
Mm-hmm. I think I'd just add a little bit of courage as well, too, because of the risks that we were willing to take with each other. I mean, in Life Story, we shared a lot, but then we shared even more as we got to know each other. There's even a moment, probably 3 or 4 months in, where I was really sort of taken by something that I'd seen on like a news clip about something that I thought was really powerful, and I thought, oh, that's something I'd like to share in my LinkedIn and really highlight. But there's something in the back of my mind that made me think I'm going to pass this by Mark and see what he thinks of it because of the kind of cultural context and political context. And boy, am I glad that I did, because it came across very differently to him than I would have meant it to be. So I don't know how much courage that was, maybe sort of me being safer, but I also felt like I could ask him something that was pretty sensitive and that he would know that it was well intended and that I was trusting him, not that I was, I don't know, for any other reason. So, yeah, I'd encourage people as you build the relationship, to take those risks. That I think by virtue of anybody taking this program or in this program, I think there's already a higher level of trustworthiness anyway. And so you can take some risks.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that because I felt that there were two things going on that got bigger and bigger, that sort of snowballed. One is the coaching dimension. And I know, Corey, you're thinking of how to fold that into Virtuosity. And both, well, especially Kelly and also me to some degree, we're bringing that coaching dimension into it. And then I'll just add one final dimension, which is the one we haven't yet covered in the course, and that's judgment. I believe that not just Kelly's example there, but several times over the period we've been partners, there have been choices in our lives that we shared with each other and we're not completely sure of. And I feel that because we've gone through, let's call it the character wheel, and because we've talked about it, we understand each other's balances, right? Where it's deficit or if it's surplus. And we're able to peel that a little bit as the other is making the choices. And so your second point at the beginning was about the light or the mirror. I think that came up as we went through it by using some of the coaching techniques, but also being able to balance things with that judgment in the center. So not at the beginning, but over time, that comes.
Yeah, I think that piece is really important. And even as we are thinking about bringing more character into coaching, this idea that if you can understand the character of those around you, whether it's a client or a colleague or your partner or your kid, if you can understand how all these dimensions operate when people are looking for you to provide advice or feedback, you can do so in such much more of an effective way because you can see which dimensions they need to be kind of activating or where they might be falling into that excess vice. So that's just, yeah, that's a really important takeaway. I'm thinking about just the overall kind of impact of this partnership, and we've been kind of pulling out insights along the way. But is there anything to add in terms of how this partnership has impacted either your commitment to character, even the relationship that you've created with one another? You've said that you're friends now, or being able to extract deeper insights. Like what would you say is kind of the biggest impact of this partnership for you?
Kelly, why don't you start?
Well, it's undoubtedly that I now have someone new in my life that I think we'll be friends for the rest of our lives. I mean, this is an unusually kind of rich beginning to a friendship. I mean, it often grows a little bit more slowly. This was sort of like the speed train to that sort of thing. Um, and so that's a marvelous, long-lasting takeaway. I think too, from my style, and I know everyone's different here, but from my style, this this was the difference that made the difference for me in this program. Because if it had just been like my quiet, private sort of thinking, especially given that's what I do all day anyway on character, and then meeting, monthly, as wonderfully as you do of having engaged kinds of exercises for us all, it's still, I don't remember all the people all the time too, because it's a big group. So this really humanized it, made it personal, really made it tangible for me, and engaged me at a level that I know I wouldn't have been engaged in if it hadn't been for this partnership.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the friendship, that's not an easy thing to do virtually. It's not an easy thing necessarily to do through a program. And so I very much appreciate that we were lucky enough to meet each other that way. Uh, I would say, as I was sort of alluding to at the outset, Kelly has been instrumental in helping me to find those answers on, why does character matter to me? And she's helped on definitional things, on the reflection, and I think even more regularly about the actions by asking questions and probing on the choices. And I would say finally the impact is going to be in the future, because character and leadership are going to be both part of what I do in consulting regularly, but also a big part of what I want to do in the coaching side. And to have gone through this together with Kelly makes me believe that it can be impactful, makes me see that there is value if you have those conversations. And I won't say that my skepticism is completely gone, but I will say that I have, a healthy respect that it can benefit. And so I want to bring that forward in the work I do. So I think that's a pretty big impact as well.
Yep.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Huge impacts for sure. And when you think about, again, we've been extracting the insights throughout, recommendations throughout, but if you have to kind of boil it down, I'll ask you two sets of recommendations or pieces of advice for people interested in this. And the first one is, if people are thinking about adding a partner, what might your recommendations be in terms of who they might consider, in adding that partner?
Mm.
This might seem a little paradoxical, but I would recommend people who aren't really in your inner circle.
Mhm.
Because I think you get enough feedback often, or reflections from people in your inner circle, or it's hard for people to see you freshly. And if you're trying to grow and change or develop, I think it's often easier to do it with people who don't have a really set view of you, because then you're not fighting against their beliefs. Um, so whether or not you choose someone who's like in your field or in your organization but farther away, I think that matters less. I think it's more about like how set is the other person's view of you already.
Yeah, I hadn't given this too much thought, but I would say, in addition to having somebody who maybe doesn't know you that well, I would suggest that you would consider uh, partnering with people who are at different stages of their character journey. Um, and I feel that because Kelly has been doing it for so long, and I have been not doing it very long at all, those perspectives actually were valuable. I'll be curious to see whether Kelly agrees with me, but I actually think that that difference brings new insights on both sides, and allows both sides to grow differently. So if there's a way to do that in Virtuosity, I would think that might be something valuable.
Mhm.
I love both of those insights because they're, like you said, Kelly, like paradoxical. Like you almost wouldn't think about these, but I fully agree with both of them. I think they're right on. And Mark, as you were talking too about the different stages, even as we started this podcast, when you started with actually like, what does character mean? What is the definition of character? As someone that's been in the field for a long time now, I forget how important just that fundamental starting question is. And so for the people that have been in the character space for a while, seeing someone new to the character space come into it, the insights and learnings that they're experiencing is so valuable. So I'm sure you saw that, Kelly. And then, of course, Mark gets all of your wisdom from being in this space for a long time. So I totally see how that works. And I was even thinking even a kind of a different lens too around people talk about like the different hierarchies in organizations. Should you have people across those different hierarchies, like, leaders versus non-leaders? And I think it's a way to kind of normalize and have partnerships across those hierarchies in the sense that character is for everyone. We're all on that development journey. And so that could be a really interesting area to play with as well. But I will say that if you are with people every day, that's also still a good partnership to consider. I mean, it's really interesting because I'm also partners with my husband. And it's amazing how many times, even in that stage one, discovering what your character looks like, I'm focusing on resilient right now. And I'll just turn to him and say, how do you see my resilience showing up? Or when it's, the deficient vice or the excess vice, I just ask him how he sees it showing up. And it's very interesting because I don't typically ask him these questions. And it's really fun to hear, most of the time fun, sometimes challenging or difficult, but it's a whole new lens and it opens up a whole new kind of conversational space with people that you're even close to. So I guess there's so many different recommendations, and I'm glad that you guys brought up the paradoxical kind of unthought of a recommendation so people really can kind of open their minds to different ways of thinking about partnerships. And the last piece of advice I'm looking for you to share would be for people that already are in partnerships. How could they get the most out of the experience? And so I think you already shared a lot about your structures and your tips about, sharing those daily reflections with one another, starting with like sharing that the life story at the beginning. Is there any other advice, or even going back to advice that you've already touched on, that you want to reiterate the importance of?
This is a bit of a risky one, Tori, so I'll be interested how you react to it. But it is possible to give advice to treat the partnership as the core element of virtuosity. It doesn't mean that the app isn't really important. It doesn't mean that the monthly workshop isn't really important. But I think, as Kelly was saying earlier, this makes a big difference in how you relate to the program and what value you can capture from the program. And so at the beginning, I treated partnering as just a piece. And I probably didn't think it was going to become the most important piece. But I would encourage people to have that open mindset, not necessarily to set it as a goal, but to think of it potentially as being that. And I think that brings it to a different level.
Funny, Mark, just hearing you say that, I kind of felt like my brain shifted because it was like, oh, he's right. That's actually what happened. And to your point, it's not that it's sort of minimizing the other pieces. It enables the other pieces to help us to create more meaning and traction and depth of understanding. So it's, as a system, it works beautifully together. And but to your point just a few moments ago, Corey, I think that everybody needs to just approach this in the way that fits them and know that there are many ways of putting it all together. And, for another paradox or polarity, kind of hold it lightly at the same time of being really committed to what you're doing, and it'll emerge for you in your partnership.
Yeah, I love this idea of it being central. And I definitely treat it as a central piece with the partners that I have. And I think something that I need to continue thinking about, and if you guys have ideas, we'll take this offline, but how do we make it more central? Both of you were so committed. But yeah, how do you, without kind of making it forceful, how do you set it up to be such a foundational piece? And I can think of some ways to kind of continue to chip away at making that structure more central. But yeah, I look forward to more of your thoughts on how to do that for our 2026 program. So those are most of the questions that I was thinking about in terms of insights that I wanted to gather from you. But is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to share, whether it is specifically about the partnership, other insights coming out of the program, advice, anything that's on your mind that we haven't covered?
I think we've covered quite a lot. I guess the natural next thing about it is something that Kelly and I have not really talked about, which is how do you continue this? And whether it's just she and I continuing as partners and as friends going forward, or Corey, you thinking about, do you want, let's call them alumni of the program, to be potential partners, or folding them into the coaching idea? How do you build on it when it works, and how do you help others when it's not working so well? I think that's a very natural space to sort of ask questions and to try and come up with some experiments, let's say.
That's a really good thing. And actually, I was thinking about this, Mark, when we were saying, "Oh, we're not meeting." We didn't meet last night because that would have been our time because we were doing this instead. And I felt like, oh, and then that made me think of, well, what's it going to be like, after December 18th or whatever it is, and we don't have that. And then I thought, well, doesn't mean we have to cancel it. Like we could still keep doing it too. Like so, yeah, that's something that actually is going to be my agenda item for us for next time. Mark, is what's next.
Yeah.
But I love these ideas that you're coming up with of how could we, um, you know, kind of continue through this structure, or is there any way we could be helpful, Corey, to what comes next, or kind of all of the above. I was looking through your notes too, Mark, to see if there's anything else that we didn't cover, and the only other thing was that you did raise how much we both also shared with each other learning and resources and other topics that were related to what we did. So these were things that were like supporting either models or research or just good stories to support the character dimensions that we were talking about. That's been just a cherry on top of everything else of having um, Mark's ideas and Mark's references and to these other resources that I just wouldn't have expected. So for two nerdy people who are curious and love to learn, it actually, that was another great piece that kept stimulating our ongoing learning that I really, really valued.
Oh, very interesting. And I love this idea of continuing to think about what's next. We have a lot of people asking us like what does come next. And the reason why, well, part of the reason why we made this a year-long program is because it does enable us enough time to cultivate habits that could sustain. But the question is, without the current structure, what are the structures we create to continue to sustain these habits that we've built? So I'm definitely going to follow up with you guys for a brainstorming session to think about what are some of these things that we could offer to people to keep the ball rolling. Well, anything else before we close up? Again, no pressure. I just want to make sure that we've provided the time to extract all of the valuable insights you've shared and gained along the way.
Well, nothing more than a big thank you, Corey, to you. I think I've watched many, not all of the podcasts, and you were creative enough to say, "Hey, let's try one with both of you." And I think that's wonderful that we mix it up a bit, and hopefully this brings some value to others in the program or in future programs.
Yeah, I'll add my thanks to Corey. This has been just a tremendously enriching experience. I'm grateful to you and Mary, and also and grateful to you, Mark, and all the other participants in the program. I feel like I learned something from you every month, not only about character, but even about how to facilitate in a nice way with variety over time. And your new explainer videos, or whatever you're calling them, are masterful. I was texting Mark on the last one saying, "Who writes these for her?" Like, I don't. Do you write them?
Yeah.
They're really good. They're really good. So, yeah, anybody who isn't watching those, you're missing out. So I'd highly recommend those.
Oh, well, thanks to you both because, I was just reflecting on my last month and I just feel, and Kelly, I don't know if you feel this way, but sometimes being in the character space, trying to kind of push this paradigm shift of character alongside competence, sometimes there's a lot of challenges and obstacles that we're met with. And I found I've just been feeling the last month has been particularly challenging. But when I get to work with people and see people like both of you, and see the inspiring work that you are doing and the commitment to these types of things and seeing the benefits that comes out of it, it really does drive the meaning in the work that we do. And it means so much to me that you guys have, put the commitment into this and you're willing to share your insights today that you have. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here and the commitment you've had over the last year. It's just absolutely fabulous. You have just finished another episode from the Virtuosity podcast. If you have any questions and want to connect, please reach out to me at Corey@virtuositycharacter.ca. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. As always, thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.